Hey everyone, welcome to Brew Talks. We are live in Denver, Colorado, and this is very weird for me.
We're back.
Yeah, I know,
We're
back. We're like Michael Jordan, we're back, right? I'm Justin Kindle, the editor of Brewbound, and we are psyched to have you all here. I can't believe I'm actually in front of people right now. That feels weird, but...
We checked to make sure we were all wearing pants. We're like, are we on Teams meeting, or do we got our pants on? We got our pants on.
It's not a Zoom, Sam. It's not a Zoom. I would like to introduce my colleague, my co-host, my tag team partner in all things Brewbound, Jess Infante. What's up, Jess?
Not much, Justin. How are you? Oh.
Denver, I gotta ask you guys, like, how are you all doing out there? That's pretty good. That's better than I thought we were going to get. So, thanks to all of you for coming out. Thanks to everybody at home who are watching this on the live stream. Thanks for supporting the Colorado Brewers Guild. We've got proceeds going to them from this event. So, thank you to all of you for supporting them. Give yourself a hand. And we got to thank our sponsors, our presenting sponsors, Dogfish Head and O-I. We got to thank John I. Haas, the Reyes Beer Division, Orchestra. We've got G&D Chillers. We've got Inland Packaging and Ska Fabricating, right?
Yeah.
We've been doing this. We've been practicing the last 2 days. So, I also want to shout out our Generation Z correspondent, Zoe Licata, down here.
All right, Zoe.
Zoe and Jess are going to be co-hosting the Generation Z marketing panel that we want you all to stick around for after this panel.
And we decided you were too old for that job.
I am definitely too old for that job. So you got to know when to step away when you're on the verge of 44. So, and I want to thank our AV team, Sarah, Megan, everybody holding it down so we can be up here and do all of this. Thank you to them. So with all of that out of the way, and thank you for clapping for them, we got a cheap plug. We've got Brewbound Live coming up in Santa Monica, California, November 30th, December 1st. If you like what you see here, we're going to do that times 10 out in California, plus we'll be by the beach. I mean, there are a lot of selling points there. There's Shay J, there's all the after hours networking, so come join us in Santa Monica. And with that, let's get started here. It's CBC, and we really couldn't start off or come back to you all with a panel about hard seltzer or RTDs right away. We want to talk about core beer, traditional beer. And we've got a bunch of OG craft brewers up here to do it. So without further ado, let's introduce them. Sam Calagione, the co-founder of Dogfish Head. Thanks for being here, Sam.
Good to be back, Justin. Good to be back and be in live rooms with so many live brothers and sisters. Thanks to Herman's Hideaway for hosting this. Thanks for Charlie and Kevin for hooking up the Randall in the back. Couldn't be more excited to be here today.
Always excited to have you, and we are excited to have Carrie Junker, the EVP of Bell's Brewery. Thanks for being here.
How are you today?
And bookending me over here is Steve Fetchheimer, the CEO of New Belgium Brewing Company. Thanks for being here, Steve.
Thanks for having me. Welcome, everybody.
So like I said, we spend a lot of time talking about hard seltzer and RTDs, and with good reason, those are some growth drivers. But we want to talk about beer. So Sam, how do each of you view the state and health of the traditional craft beer scene in 2021?
Well, as we've talked about, there's tons of energy around the fourth category, and we've talked about that on past panels, and I'm sure we'll talk about it again. But when you think about the historic context, there were 3 categories for thousands of years, and there's only been a 4th category for a few years. And so the excitement and sexiness of craft beer and beer in general will come back, and at a greater frequency than the sexiness of mead, which comes back into vogue about every 500 years. I think we're looking at just a few-year cycle. I also love the way that you wrote this as the state and health of the traditional beer category in 2021, because I do think one of our great superpowers as brewers is to think outside the box of just the 4 traditional beer ingredients. And when you think about all the opportunities to play both in the 4th category and in beer with malt-based beverages, I think we're perfectly situated, for this moment that we're coming into as brewers and beer makers.
Carrie, how are you feeling about traditional core craft beer heading into the back half of 2021 and 2022?
Yeah, thanks. So, as I see it, we are at a place where there's always an occasion to drink beer. And to Sam's point, that 4th category is super exciting. But at the end of the day, people have been drinking beer, craft beer, for hundreds of years. That is not going to go away. This will be an ebb and flow, as we've seen with any other cycle, or any other segment. And so I think that us brewers are positioned to continue to make quality beer, and there's always an occasion to drink beer, frankly.
Steve, you have a lot to feel good about heading into the end of 2021 and 2022. Voodoo Ranger is on fire. So what's your perspective on craft heading into the back half of the year in 2022?
I certainly agree with everything that Sam and Carrie said about the industry, and there's definite ebbs and flows. I do think, though, it's helpful for all of us to realize that within beer, craft beer is actually losing share, and especially if you include seltzers in that. And then the beer industry is losing share to wine, and it's losing share to spirits in particular. And these things do ebb and flow, and you can go back and look 20 years back and 50 years back and 100 years back, and there's different market shares for these different categories. But we have a real opportunity in getting together here for CBC's an awesome starting point for that. But to have a real conversation around how do we reinvigorate the beer category, because I'm with Carrie, every occasion's an occasion for beer, and that's a really important thing for us all to remember. But right now, we're just not winning enough occasions as an industry, and I think we can do better as we think about brand building, as we think about product offerings, to really reinvigorate the industry, because that's good news for everyone who's in this room.
Steve, I'm really glad you brought up wine because we're going to talk about that in 1 second. But quick plug for our text line. Everybody here and watching at home, if you want to ask a question of any of these guys, you can text it to 617-336-8560, and then we'll be able to see them, and we'll get you some answers. So, that said, sorry. It's hard to do this with a beer and mic and an iPad.
This is an occasion for beer, though.
This is, if there ever were an occasion for beer, it's certainly this. So, about a month ago, industry watcher Mark Gallo, who's a prolific tweeter, and probably watching, hey Mark, he threw out a tweet asking whether traditional beer or traditional wine needed a bigger reset or makeover. Does traditional beer need a reset? Why or why not? What do you guys think? Steve, let's start with you.
I don't think traditional beer needs a reset. It's a core 3 category. It's part of a core 4 category now within our industry. Huge amounts of occasions to which it's relevant. I just think we need to be focused as an industry as much as possible on brand building and explaining to people why they should interact with the wonderful beers that we're all making on a more regular basis, and why they're relevant to occasions, and why they fit with their passions, and why they fit within their communities, and why it's relevant to them. Because I think that's how we bring people back to the category. In spirits, I came from the spirits industry, for people who don't know, kind of think about the world a little bit differently, and so does wine. And we have a really important differentiator within our industry in terms of the occasions we're relevant to, and I think we just need to tell that story better, and get people more excited for our category than they are right now.
Carrie, what do you think? Do we need a makeover to get people more excited?
You stole my word. So I was going to also say, I don't know that we need a makeover. I do think we need focus, in particular on traditional beers, on beers that convert folks from potentially macro light lagers into craft beers. And that's part of how you build those brands. And you need to be clear with your consumer about when is the occasion for your beer. You need to help them understand that, because they have a lot of choices, to your point.
Sam, you guys have made some portfolio-ish tweaks and stuff. What do you say to the focus point?
I would say, not needing a reset or agreeing, 100% of what's said so far. Beer itself not needing a reset, but I think how we sell beer, how we talk about beer, might need a bit more of a reset when you think about the inflection point that we're at. If you look at the top 100, IRI-defined craft SKUs, now most of those beers and those labels on them are literally of legal drinking age themselves. They're at least 21 years old, those beers, which means that the person that just turned 21, that LDA drinker, grew up with Two Hearted, with Fat Tire, with 60 Minute in their parents' fridge. And I think part of becoming an adult is kind of rebelling against the generation above you. So I don't think we should be surprised that they're finding newer beverages that are appealing to them in their messaging and their taste profile. But I think craft beer has everything those other beverages have. We just have to kind of reframe how we're presenting our stuff. They might not want to talk about the founders of the breweries as these, crazy pioneers. They don't give a shit about that. There's 9,000 founders now. It's not some magical trick that happened. But talking about the brands with passion and what makes them distinct, with fun, with authenticity, talking about the values of the brands in a way that appeals to younger drinkers. I think we do need a little bit of a reset there, but I don't think our beverages need the reset, just how we frame them with younger consumers.
So let's zero in on some of those flagships and how your view of them has changed over the last 24 months or so. Carrie, what role is a brand like Two Hearted playing in Bell's portfolio now, and how are your wholesalers and retailers viewing them?
Yeah, so to be fair, our view on Two Hearted over the past 24 months has not changed. It continues to be, the most relevant growth driver for us. And really what we've seen from consumers and retailers is a bit of a hunkering down to trusted quality brands that they can depend on. They're a little less risk adverse to try the blueberry, lavender, honey, sour, et cetera, beer, and are really looking for beers that can land and will drive velocity for them.
Steve, Fat Tire has long been the flagship of New Belgium, but you've got Voodoo Ranger coming on very, very strong. How are you viewing that brand in relationship to this hot coming brand?
I certainly think flagships are critical. I think it's actually hard to keep up with the level of innovation, and if you're going to have a brewery of size and scale, you actually need really big brands that carry the day and things that consumers want to come back to day after day, week after week as a core brand within their portfolio. And that does come back to brand building and relevancy to those individual beer drinkers on a weekly basis. For us, Voodoo Rangers honestly is our flagship now. We'll sell 3 times more Voodoo Ranger this year than we'll sell Fat Tire. They're both huge brands, but Voodoo Ranger on its own would probably be a top 5 craft brewery if it was its own brewery today. And we're coming at it by asking distributors to focus on those brands. And yes, we have innovation and we have some new SKUs that are out there in certain markets, but we're really on our 4th year of saying Voodoo Ranger is our number 1 priority for our distributors. Fat Tire is our number 2 priority for our distributors. And that consistency is, I think, incredibly important to continuing to build those flagship brands.
Sam, what's the view on 60 Minute now? How's that playing in your portfolio?
Yeah, I think to Steve's point, I think perception's reality, and those of us that are in the room that aren't like, taproom breweries where you can really decide every day what your focus is going to be and move it around. Those of us that are relying on multi-state distribution where our message is likely more controlled by 2 tiers, frankly, sometimes more than ourselves, we have to be really prescriptive. And for us, we talk about, that really 60 Minute isn't our flagship. 90 Minute came 2 years before 60. So really, continually hopped IPAs are our flagship, and we've been making 60, 90, and 120 Minute together for two decades. So kind of talking them to, in concert, collectively those 3 beers are 52%-ish of Dogfish Head sales. Having those conversations, and again, not really talking about deviating from focusing on the liquids, but always trying to make sure it's not static in terms of how we present those brands in marketing, redoing the packaging, bringing things like Randall's to events so consumers see how a beer that was continually hopped in the room that they're drinking it is impacted. Keeping that stuff fresh, but focusing on the fewer SKUs with your distributors and tight messaging on your priorities with your distributors is critical.
So Sam, Dogfish Head just turned 26, and in that time, you've built an enormous following. As you're trying to evolve and grow the brand, how much do you worry about alienating existing customers while trying to attract new ones?
And that's a timely one for us. So recently, Tuesday of this week was National Craft Beer Lovers Day, and we put up on our social, which is a beautiful thing for millions of craft beer lovers, and we put up on ours, a saying that I've said for many years, which is the craft brewing community is 99% asshole free. In the context of that day, we were talking about, of course, the giant community, but very quickly the discussion on our social channels talked to a very serious issue about industry workers and a lot of unfortunate things that have happened and been exposed and been discussed in the last 16 months. So my wife, who's a lot smarter than I am and runs our social, said, okay, this is happening. Let's not back out. People were saying, oh, take that down, da-da-da-da. And we're like, no, this is the right moment for the discussion. So yeah, probably we alienated both some longtime drinkers and some newer drinkers, but the mixed message was pretty equal, and we thought it was worth letting that debate continue to play out. So sometimes that stuff happens and it's not fun, but I don't think it's bad either. A British poet once said, "What's so funny about peace, love, and understanding?" That stuff's not supposed to be funny, but it's important. So we're letting that stuff play out, and it'll probably alienate some people who have drunk Dogfish. And as we continue to have discussion, hopefully it'll have others embrace us as well.
It was smart to leave it up, I think. I think it shows that you guys were thinking about it.
So are there a lot more assholes now?
I'm not going to say no comment.
You don't have to answer
I'm not going to say no comment. It's hard for me to say no comment.
You don't have to answer.
I would say when Dogfish opened, there were 600 breweries in America. Now there's 9,000. But thankfully, there was probably hundreds of people that love beer. Now there's millions. So odds of math are there's a lot more amazing, amazing people than there are assholes. But there's more assholes.
Thank you for answering that. Carrie, Bell's was founded in 1985. What are the challenges in marketing an established brand to a new generation of consumers that, again, I am too old to speak to, and that's why Zoe will be up here later?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that we think about, particularly with a brand like Two Hearted that's been around almost as long as the brewery has. And as we think about that, we're very careful. We do not want to alienate the loyal craft beer fans who continue to vote us the #1 beer year after year. We have to be mindful of that. And while we do that, we believe that an example of Two Hearted's messaging of, it is built on quality, it is simplicity, it is a delicious beer, and we think those kind of messages, we can reach a younger generation. We need to go through the right channels to reach them, right? So it's not necessarily traditional marketing and those pieces. We need to meet them where they are and tell them why Two Hearted is important.
So Steve, New Belgium turned 30 this year, which is a big number. What challenges are you guys facing in just growing and changing and evolving?
I think it's probably no secret to most people who are fans of craft beer, fans of New Belgium, that as we put a focus on becoming a national brewery, we probably tried to make Fat Tire appeal to a broader group of core consumers. And that makes a lot of sense when you're trying to go national, and it's like, how am I relevant in New York City, or how am I relevant in Boston? And what ends up happening when you do that is you kind of water down what the brand really stands for. And as we thought about it a couple of years ago, I joined the company in 2017, and into 2018, we said, look, the core of this brand is more of an outdoor lifestyle brand. And if you were going to build a brand today in any category, right, Fat Tire is actually something you would really aspire to have. And it's built on sustainability, it's built on outdoor lifestyle, it's aspirational for a lot of people, regardless of where they live, all around the country. So we need to bring the brand back to what it always was and what drove its prominence. And we moved away from the packaging with our somewhat historical bicycle on a somewhat nondescript sidewalk and said, no, it's a Colorado brand. It's about the outdoor lifestyle. We went back to having, influencers and a focus in, some of our core states and the mountain states, and said, this is our brand. And it may not appeal to everyone, and that's okay. But there's a ton of 21-year-olds for whom that is still a super relevant brand message. And if we're true to the brand and we're true to what it really stands for, and we operate our company that way and we treat our people that way, and everything we do is lined up behind the brand, then that's okay. We'll recruit new people. And we don't have to recruit everybody, because if you try to win with everybody, you're probably going to win with nobody. And that's just a really important part of the marketing and the brand building behind Fat Tire.
Yeah, for sure. Sam, Instagram posts aside, how are you guys growing and changing at the ripe old age of 26?
So, I mean, I would say we definitely think about geography similarly, where we have, focus areas of geography. There might be another question later on that, but obviously we're an East Coast oriented brand, so we're doing more experimentation with more SKUs closer to home, and really using, our Miami, and Delaware locations as sort of the Jackson Pollock, galleries to throw shit at the wall, while we're using Milton more to dial in some Warhols to send out, coast to coast, and really, unpretentiously approaching it as art first and business second, having that, discussion with consumers and experimentation. I would say is a big core tenet of the Dogfish brand, and I do think that's pretty, timeless. Sometimes our messaging is different, like when we're at Firefly next month, the big, music festival in our area, and selling 60 Minute and 90 next to newer brands like Hazy O. We know that discussion is going to be very different, for a Lizzo fan than when an older band plays on that stage, and so making sure your messaging is relevant to the people you're talking to, and being more intentional about that messaging per audience is something that I think craft breweries are just starting to get into versus one message for all.
So we've got an audience question here that I want to jam in, and this is to the panel. Is there anything that craft has been doing over the last several years that has hastened the slowdown that we should think about not doing anymore?
750 ml bottles. Are we still doing those?
Bottles in general. Are we still doing bottles in general? Sorry, O-I, I see you on the sponsor here.
Yeah, no, we love you, O-I. Go ahead, Steve. Jump on that grenade.
Everyone's passing it over to me. I think it's really important that we're focused on making great beer. And that's a really important part of this, is that anytime someone's interacting with our industry, that they're having a really good experience with the beer that they're having. And it's true in New Belgium, right? We run multiple tap rooms all around the country, and it's really important that 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th tap is also a really good beer. And we all make certain beers exceptionally well, and sometimes, you have a bad batch or you have some issues, and you want to make sure that no matter what, if someone's coming into this industry, that they're having that kind of world-class beer experience. That's how we talk about it at New Belgium, and I think that's a really important focus for all of us, that every touch point is a world-class touch point for people, because they have so many other options right now.
I'd also say, like, in the last, I agree with everything, and I'd also say, like, in the last few years, I feel like because craft has slowed down and there's a bunch of dark capacity in our industry, oftentimes there's too many brands that are launched that are more fast followers than pioneering concepts, and you get it. If somebody's going to pay off their stainless to a bank, they're less willing to take a risk, but then it crowds segments that, the burgeoning, the starters in that category, founded before the category even took hold. So the opportunity to be, more judicious and have more faith in your innovations versus just spending time saying, oh, that's the hot thing in IRI the last 13 weeks, I better quickly release that, would be something that I think has been a challenge for craft in the last 24 months or so.
That's a great point. Perfect segue to the next question. Each of your companies has established some new brands. You've worked really hard to do it, and you found a lot of success with it between Hazy O and Sequench and the whole Voodoo Ranger family and Dominga and Official and No Yeah. I mean, Sam, how are you balancing your new priorities with your existing ones?
So, using on-prem coming back, for an example, which we may talk more about as well, we're basically thoughtfully saying we want to make sure as consumers come back to on-prem, there's both the brands, Carrie said that, like, they recognize and they want to get behind. I was telling her an awesome pint of Two Hearted with deep dish pizza somewhere on the street with the buses yesterday. So we're saying, our two primary focuses on-prem are 60 Minute, which is a 20-something-year-old brand, and Hazy O, which is a less than 1-year-old brand, and they both are, we think, pretty complementary. A more traditional West Coast style with a unique continual hopping, and then the first oat milk infused hazy IPA. So having that balance between new and flagship is something we think about every day.
Steve, you mentioned before that Voodoo Ranger Imperial has really kind of overtaken Fat Tire. It's now the #2 overall selling craft beer offering in the off-premise, #1 selling IPA, which is huge. How has that beer and that brand family changed the trajectory of New Belgium and opened the door to younger consumers?
For us, I think I mentioned before, in 2018, we told our distributors your #1 priority is Voodoo Ranger. And that was a big shift. And we just opened a whole bunch of new states on the East Coast, sort of under the promise of Fat Tire. And we actually said, you know what? There's a bigger opportunity here with Voodoo Ranger. And then you're right, within that, Imperial is the largest variant within the Voodoo Ranger family, but still only makes up maybe 1/3 to 40% of the brand overall, and is standalone the largest IPA. It's given us a chance to go have a conversation with different communities that are out there. And that's what's been really important to us as we've recruited a new generation. I talked earlier about Fat Tire and being an outdoor brand. Voodoo's really centered in the art community, in the gaming community. And that's a different set of consumers to go and talk to. It's a huge community as well. And what we've tried to do, and going back to the earlier question around what have we not done as well as an industry, I don't think we've reached out to communities. We've tried to grow the craft beer community. We've taught people what makes craft beer really special. We've taught them about hops. We've taught them about brewing processes. Now there's an opportunity for us to go into their communities and participate in what they want to do. And so if we show up at, if we show up at gaming events or we show up at art events, that's us participating in a different community with our beer, and we think that's a great way to reach new consumers.
I want to go back to something that you said at the beginning of this answer. So in 2018, when you went to wholesalers and said, hey, here's your new priority instead of Fat Tire, how was that received?
We were actually at Colorado State University. That's where we have at least in that year, that's where we had our distributor conference. Unfortunately, they're mostly virtual now. It sort of felt like someone dropped the mic, right? Or the record stopped, whatever analogy you kind of want to use. But actually, people really quickly bought into it, and that's what was really cool. And you actually see it in the numbers. So it's very easy to say, hey, we're going to change our priorities. And if you have a real factual reason for that, and then there's real momentum behind the brand, and now we went from, a 200,000 barrel brand to over a 600,000 barrel brand and the #1 IPA in the country, people start to believe in it because they're seeing the numbers, right? They see green numbers on their distribution sheets every single month. That's a really good place to be. And then we can continue to build on it, and we can continue to invest in those brands.
I assume they're pretty happy about it now, so.
I think everyone agrees that was a good decision in 20. Sometimes we make bad decisions. We don't make all good decisions, but that one was a good decision.
Carrie, Bell's is doing something a little uncharacteristic for itself, launching a brand family play. Whoa. What can you tell us about that?
Sure. So we took, our most iconic brand, Two Hearted, and in the middle of a pandemic, decided it would be a great idea to launch our lifestyle brand, Lighthearted, attached to it. And I think, we were deliberate and, admittedly slower than my friends to my right and left to really take that leap of faith of that brand family piece. And we are really seeing that pay off. And even if you think about something like Oberon, which is a seasonal, yet a flagship, also different than most other breweries, and we have taken that and launched Oberon variants inside of the Oberon season. And the goal for that is to drive Oberon sales as much as it is for you to pick up a tropical Oberon, right? It is really in order to take a look at looking at things that make sense, and particularly as we looked at Two Hearted, that whatever beer, any beer that we put with that brand family has to live up to the expectation when you pick up a Two Hearted and have a deep dish pizza with it, so that's why, we're a little more intentional. I mean, we're also the only regional brewery sitting up here, and that is certainly not lost on us as well.
Is Oberon by volume #2?
Oberon by volume is #2, absolutely.
I'm glad you mentioned Oberon because Bell's is known for some heavyweight seasonals. You've got Oberon, you've got Hop Slam. Tell me a little bit how you're capitalizing on extending those brands a little bit further. I think you've got a new series too that you're using for that.
We do. So really, being candid, we were struggling a little bit with our traditional seasonal. So think something like Best Brown. The craft beer drinker didn't want to wait until October to drink a brown ale, right? So we have really taken that seasonal SKU, the Oberon drinker, if you will, which has that shared UPC, and trying to drive excitement back into it. So we've got a new beer coming out. It's an entirely rotational wheat series. You know what we do really well at Bell's? IPAs and wheat beers. We do them exceptionally well. So we are capitalizing on that. We've got Rind Over Matter coming out. It's out now if you can find it. Sort of a citrusy wheat beer. And then we've got a new one, Low Sun, for those very ancient craft beers may remember what Oberon used to be named, which I will not say on the stage, but that is a low-calorie wheat that will be out in time, just in time for your New Year's resolutions. So we are really taking and looking at a different look at seasonal and transitioning that into a wheat beer rotational, which is something our brewers do well. A category of wheat continues to be, a big driver for us.
Sam, how are you approaching seasonals now?
Yeah, I mean, that's always been an important part of our portfolio. The first beer I ever brewed as a home brewer and entered into competition was our pumpkin ale, and we were among the first to do pumpkins commercially in the mid-'90s. And that's still by far our biggest seasonal release. But about 5 years ago, when for certain distributors, seasonal became a dirty word, we evolved that cadence of quarterly releases to be called our art series. And as the official Brewery Record Store Day, we align with artists who either do album covers we love or gig posters we love, and we have them do the art of the 4 beers. But what we do is we try to keep that really dynamic. So other than Pumpkin Ale, no release in that art series quarterly thingy gets more than 2 years. They all share one UPC, so the goal is to keep them in market and keep that placement everywhere. But we try to bring a lot of our innovation through that. Distributors and retailers love that too, because it's also at the higher end of our pricing side. So we do still sell a lot of beer in glass. Our 90-minute and art series are mostly in glass 6-packs at $14.99, and so that's an important category for us. And similarly with our canned variety packs, we're also doing finally a series of different 12-packs 3 times a year that share a UPC, meant to be kept in market as kind of one thing for all 12 months. The one we just released is our Hoppy Variety Pack, which actually has a scratch and sniff on it. So on the outside of the pack, you can smell the hops, which is kind of nice. And the other thing when you're building flagships is that variety pack that more and more of our distribs want to see us focus on, particularly outside of our home area. The opportunity to always keep your flagship in there with other Crack-A-Jack prize innovations is just a great sort of sampling and remembrance opportunity for folks who might not have returned to your flagship as frequently as you'd hoped, and we do that in our variety packs.
Steve, Voodoo Ranger was built on IPA, but you're going to be introducing a light lager under that brand family. So why is that the right play, and what are the risks of going outside the IPA wheelhouse?
So we actually have launched the lager.
Even better.
It's in market.
Even better.
I think it's interesting to think about how do brands span categories, right? As breweries here, we obviously all span different categories within beer, and you see within our industry brands spanning categories, and you certainly see it outside of beer as well, as people are looking into how do you take trusted trademarks and trusted brands and make them relevant in more occasions. We don't know with Voodoo, right? That's the honest answer, is we think that brand is strong enough and consumers have enough passion around it that it can be more than just an IPA brand. But we're testing it. And so the light lager, Voodoo 99.9, is available in North Carolina. So we've got a test market going. It's been going incredibly well, but it's 3 or 4 weeks of data. And I think everyone says their new launches are going incredibly well after 3 or 4 weeks, regardless of what the data tells you. That's always what ends up in your publications and others. But we are excited with where it's at, and we'll learn. And if we see that brand can expand beyond the traditional IPA category, then there's a lot of places you can take it. And if we see that consumers really think of it as an IPA brand, which honestly might be where it sits in consumers' heads, then we'll think about innovation going forward in a different way. But it's important to be able to do those test and learns and understand where can your brand grow, how do consumers really think about your brand, how are they going to react at the point of purchase if they see you participating in a different category. And so we're excited to push forward with the test, and actually super appreciative of all the retailers out in North Carolina who've supported the test.
The best thing I learned in graduate school for marketing was that your brand is not what you think it is, it's what your consumers say it is. So that's definitely the way to go about it. So on the same similar topic, we are at fall reset time. How have discussions with wholesalers and retailers gone overall, and what are they looking for this year after the year and a half that we've had?
Are you still looking at me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm just checking. You've been
Very
passing the
polite,
questions
very
around.
polite.
I think the key word for retailers right now is incrementality. And it doesn't help if they take out a Two Hearted listing and put in a Voodoo Ranger listing if they sell the same number of six-packs at the end of the month. And it becomes about how do we help the retailer attract more consumers, win more occasions, and grow their overall business. And we've all been so focused on our own brands. You have to flip that around and say, if I'm the retailer, what allows someone to make an extra purchase while they're in their store, or what causes someone to stay for, if you're talking on-premise, right, for a second drink or a third drink, because there is so much profitability for retailers on and off in that incremental purchase. And so we have to be offering that. And so as we've thought about innovation, it's less about, hey, what's that next logical spot for Voodoo? What part of the IPA category don't we participate in? Because let's be honest, lots of other breweries participate in whatever that place is that we don't, and that may not be incremental. But it's how do we bring something new to the category and new to the brand that's actually going to drive incremental purchases in the on-premise and in the off-premise.
Carrie, what is Bell's hearing from wholesale and retail partners as we go into fall resets?
You know, we're hearing this, what I feel like is an unfair, little bit of mixed messaging, right? So we want variety and we want simplicity at the same time. So I do think that a lot of what we're hearing is, you know, driving towards variety packs, which Bell's will start to participate in next year in earnest. And, you know, it was already mentioned that really is a great way to drive sampling and the core brands, traditional brands that you have, and be able to get feedback from those consumers. So UPC simplicity is a piece that we are hearing. And then certainly, you know, they're also asking for making sure that we have the right styles and sizes for each of those occasions. So whether it's how many 19.2s can I make versus how many 6-packs, and making sure that we're lining up those right sizes with where they're looking to sell beer.
Sam, what have you guys been hearing from your partners?
Yeah, similarly, I already mentioned the variety pack, you know, is an ask that's getting louder and louder nationally as a focus, a higher level focus than it was for us. I'd also say Hazy O, that folks see that's a well differentiated with the oat milk in a sea of IPAs, and staying on the C theme. You know, we kind of, one of your questions that I don't know we'll get to is, you know, which brands are healthy, which ones are having challenges, and 60 Minute and 90 both compared to average craft are healthy. One that's not right now for us here today is Sequench, and it was a self-inflicted wound as you know, on-prem shut down last year. We made the decision to say, okay, we can only have a finite of draft priorities, and we said let's focus on 60 and hazy and stop doing Sequench, and it really did hurt the Sequench trends, and so now we're just listening to our distribs and bringing that back on draft. So, and then I know we're not supposed to say anything about fourth category Voldemort shit here, but canned cocktails that we've been distilling for 20 years, and we're really proud of that line that we've gotten out. So there's a lot of talk with our distribs right now about that too.
You promised. You
Did I
promised not to talk about fourth category offerings.
All right, then we're shotgunning a Sequench after.
Yes, we will. So you mentioned the on-premise with the Delta variant. How are each of you approaching the on-premise with a little bit of uncertainty out there? And we'll start with Carrie.
Yeah, I mean, I think more than most breweries, realistically, prior to COVID, we were about 40% of our business on premise. We are a pass the beer across the pint, you know, kind of brewery. So we really had to pivot really quickly. And it's important to us, though, that, you know, if you think about many bars that are built on, you know, 100 tap handles, 60, and variety, you are seeing them cull that down to 20 beers that they know are going to sell time after time, and again, drive that velocity. So, you know, we're going in with a messaging saying, it's, you know, we call it our double tap. It's Oberon and Two Hearted. Those are different drinkers for us, and they're trusted brands, and we're trying to support the on-prem as much as possible. I mean, we own an on-premise, all of us do, right? Whether it's staffing challenges or how do I even send, you know, 46 different state COVID regulations and manage that to even get to the door to get somebody to have a conversation about which Oberon, you know, Oberon or Two Hearted or, you know, handle of you lovely people do I want to take, right? That's an important piece.
Steve, how are you approaching it?
I mean, I think first with empathy, which is really what Carrie was saying, it's been incredibly tough for our on-premise partners, and we all know that because of our tap rooms that we operate and how difficult that's been, and really trying to understand what they need. And again, like Carrie, there's the offerings are being reduced. They want more known brands because they know those will pull through. price is mattering more in the on-premise than previously. It used to be really about selection and variety, but you can appreciate if your bar's been closed for 6 months or you're running at 40% of your sort of normal volumes, that price becomes a really important lever for bars to understand and dig into a little bit. And those are really the things we're focused on. We have some brands that are incredibly well known, really high velocity. We're fortunate to be able to get that there at a relatively good price in most cases, and that's the conversation we're having with people and listening to what they really need.
Sam, you mentioned the self-inflicted wounds to Sequench. So what's the strategy this fall and going into the early part of next year in the on-premise for you?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a more regional approach for us, right? So we're strongest Maine to Miami. We're a nautical themed brand, so we're over-indexing really in that space on how many SKUs we're bringing in draft, and then nationally, it's 60 hazy opt-in for Sequench, sort of west of the Mississippi, and Art Series are really our only draft focus beers on prem.
Glad you brought up NA because we have a great audience question about it. Do the panel members have any thoughts or insight on the growing NA craft beer segment? It speaks to the point of reinvigorating the conversation of beer branding and inclusion. Should a non-alcoholic option be part of the conversation in the future? You launched one. How's it going? What do you think?
So yeah, we launched both under Sam Adams. We launched Just the Haze, and we launched Lemon Quest. And we're really proud of the liquids. Like, we're using both. We installed a dealcoholization system and low gravity fermentation, and then we're blending both the dealc and the low grav. So it has real, both have really great beer flavor characteristics. I'd say, so we're more proud of the liquid, frankly, at this point than we are of the launch. It's really, really hard, when you think of how blurry the fourth category has made retail, and then you look at non-alc and where it should sit in the store, how we should be talking about it, both with consumers and distribs, the unfortunate fact that the TTB views it as alcohol in terms of how we can talk about it, even though it's not non-alcohol. Those have been real barriers I think we're facing as an industry, but I do think the consumer wants us to figure this shit out, and less about those that are walking away from alcohol, and more about those that are either looking at a pacer opportunity in the night, or just they want to drink something while they're kayaking or paddleboarding or golfing that tastes like real beer. So I don't think we should give up, but I don't think we should put the weight of seltzer volume on its shoulders. We should nurture this one and talk about it and serve it at all our booths and our events if we're making them, and let it grow organically the way craft did in the 80s and 90s.
Carrie and Steve, how is non-alc factoring into the conversations that you're having?
Well, as per usual in Bell style, the equipment's on order. We are going to let these two figure it out, see how it goes. And then we're going to come in with a delicious tasting beer that rivals what they're doing.
It's very generous of you. Steve, are you guys diving into NA?
We aren't. Actually, first of all, I think there's a real category there, and I think, actually, in fairness, the Heineken 0.0 launch probably reinvigorated that non-alc category and took it off the sort of back dusty shelves of retailers and brought it to the forefront. And there's some good craft offerings out there. I think it will be niche, and therefore, if you're going to be successful, I think you actually have to really make a great beer, and it's pretty difficult to make a great NA, and we're focused on trying to understand that. And if we can get there, we might put something out into the market that we can be really proud of. But that's a bit of the limiting factor is how do you get something out there that you think consumers are going to be really excited about and are going to add to that conversation? And we haven't, in fairness, unlocked that yet.
So another great audience question. There was a huge shift during the pandemic on how customers purchased their beer, and many smaller breweries benefited. This shift tested the three-tier system. Is that a concern to you as bigger regional and national craft breweries?
That's an interesting view as they ask the question, because I'd say, the pantry loading to a large degree benefited bigger craft breweries more so than the small guys that I know in our state. Our local laws as the pandemic started really made it hard for the smallest suppliers. So I don't know. I frankly don't know how to answer that other than to say, we're an industry of plucky entrepreneurs, as ubiquitous as maybe some of the brands we're talking about today. All of us collectively still less than 15% market share. We figure out a way to thrive in challenging moments. So I don't think it's as much about the scale of the brewery as it is the pluckiness of the entrepreneurs driving them through the challenging moment.
I would add to that I agree. You know, pantry loading was 2 big brewers' benefits realistically, and the piece that I think is important as we look at that was it was a lot for us at least about order fulfillment. You know, our distributors were stretched so thin. They have staffing challenges no different than, you know, our on-premise, and we're seeing. And so for us, we were able to capitalize because we could keep our distributors in beer, and respectfully, maybe some of those smaller breweries don't have that same, you know, opportunity.
Stevie, anything to add?
I think just a huge appreciation actually for the 3-tier system. There's no way we could have had, you know, all 8,000 of us as breweries going in and out of every retail store in the country in the middle of the pandemic. And there was a huge service provided by the distributor tier in terms of being able to keep all of our accounts in stock and help all, you know, if they are not delivering beer, right, we're not making payroll. And they had a huge part in keeping the industry afloat during the pandemic. And, you know, I think trying to pay back that appreciation by continuing to invest in brands and grow the business for everybody.
So that's how we're going to have to end this panel. Everybody out watching at home, please stick around for a special interview with O-I. We all love glass, don't we, everybody up here?
Absolutely,
We do.
absolutely.
And also
Custom
stick
O-I glass
around
bottle.
if you're here for the Jess and Zoe show. They're going to be talking about Generation Z. They've got a great panel. So let's get some beers and network.
Next.
Hey everyone, we hope you're enjoying our special Brew Talks program here at the Craft Brewers Conference in Denver. We're certainly excited to be back here on the road. But right now, we've got a special interview with one of our presenting sponsors, O-I. So joining us right now are Tim Connors, Managing Director for North America, and Lorena Alencar, the Sales Director for North American Beer. Tim and Lorena, thanks for being here and thanks for supporting Brew Talks.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
We're psyched to have you here. And Tim, I'm sure most everyone in the industry knows who O-I is, but for those who aren't in the know, give us an idea of who O-I is, what you do, and what you all are believe in.
Sure. Well, I mean, to put it very simply, we're in the glass container business, right? And we're very proud to be in the glass container business, and it's all we do, right? We are here to provide solutions for our customers using our glass package overall. So when we think about our vision for our company, it's relatively straightforward, right? We want to be the most innovative company. We want to be the most sustainable company, and we want to be the chosen supplier for brand building packaging overall, right? And so those are big words, of course, but it's really foundational for us to tell the brand story for our customers overall. So when we think back to the word innovation, just a little bit on that, right? It's part of our DNA. If we go back, our O-I has been here for over 100 years, right? And it was founded by Michael J. Owens, who came up with probably the most innovative, breakthrough, disruptive technology that completely revolutionized glass containers, right? And he founded the company based on that. And so that is part of us, right? That is part of our DNA. We're always looking for those opportunities to be disruptive, to be challenging, to bring new products to life, whether that's in process or in product. And obviously, product's very important for us as we think about opportunities with our customers. So what do we believe in, right? 3 basic tenets of what we believe in. First off, our package can tell the brand story, and it has a very unique characteristic. We've done a lot of work on this. We've gone into various neurosciences and research and how consumers buy things and make decisions. And there's a lot of work that we can work with our customers on that. And we believe we have a great package to tell that story overall. Obviously, it's a very premium package, but we think that's a great attribute of the glass container package. Secondly is, and this goes as a given, but it's important to say, our package does not interfere with the brand, right? We don't have any liners. We don't have any materials. It is basically 4 ingredients, very basic ingredients that creates an odorless, pure, clean package for the brand to be delivered to the consumer. And that goes without saying, sort of, but we're really the only package that can do that, right? Without any disruption to the brand itself. And then thirdly, and obviously we'll talk a bit more about this, as I'm sure, but is the sustainability angle of our business. Recyclability, right? It is not well known, but it needs to be well known. A glass container can last for the next 1,000 years. And I don't think that quite resonates with people, but ultimately a beverage bottle we're drinking today can be recycled over and over and over again, never losing their attributes, never losing the product. That's an important thing for people to know. And we're trying to get out there and make sure that's understood well in the world of sustainability. That's a very important thing that we believe in.
Tim, your passion for glass, it pops off the screen.
Good. I'm glad I have it, right? It's a very important product in our world.
Yeah. Lorena, we hear regularly from suppliers about the supply chain crunches that are out there. I mean, we also hear from retailers and wholesalers about those issues as well. So how can O-I help fill some of those gaps?
So it's funny you ask, because I think speaking over the years, I think we're very confident to say that we have 10 plus years of exclusive partnership with major brewers. And to me, that says something about our commitment to our customers, but also that they have been on this journey with us and they put their trust in our work, right? So basically, we're very customer focused. It's one of our core values. We we instill that kind of culture into, the sales team as well as all the team throughout all functions within OI. And I think that built a strong tie between OI and customers. Now, because of that history of being able to supply them for so long, I would say that marriage that we've been for the long term, I think our sales team as well as the craft, we both have deep understanding of each other, right? So market and their unique needs when it comes to navigating complex supply situations, right? So as an example, when I started to lead the category, it was just before the pandemic hit in 2020. And as for all of us, lots have changed in the market and we're hearing about headaches about supply and things like that. But I think I must say we were successful to get ourselves quickly together to make very difficult decisions. And we continue to be connected with our customers, keeping communication flowing even from our home. So throughout the whole time, there was basically a lot of communication. Now, in March and April, when this happened in 2020, I know I'm going back a little bit in history, but I think it's important to note, we had to reduce some line time and everybody was faced with the unknown, right? And how do we get back together to normality? And we were very quick, 4 months after, to bring, a furnace back in Texas, for example, and to be able to adapt as we're coming out of the storm. So as we saw things pick up, I think we were able to focus a little bit more, working from home with our customers to improve our process, and we did. So planning and forecast accuracy in this category has been the benchmark due to the long-term partnerships we have. And I think we have clear in our heads that we need to go beyond a little bit understanding just glass purchase, right? And understanding the market dynamics and what our customers need. Now, in 2021, it started a bit slow, but overall, we kept up with the changes as well in demand. And the important thing to note is that OI has 18 plants in North America. We have a vast global footprint, as Tim says, right? We go back way back, and we have around, I think, 72 plants in the world. And therefore, the solutions for beer and the assortment of portfolio does bring a sense of security, flexibility, and contingencies that we can bring to the customer. So we operate in a global mindset as well, and we can utilize those resources for around the world as needed. So I would say, lots of elements, but connectivity for sure. The historical and long-lasting relationships that we have built and we continue to have. We continue to lead this glass share for glass and beer. So it says something about us and our ability to supply. And of course, customer service, customer focus, and then of course, our footprint, which helps, our ability to, remove the headaches and the challenges we have together.
We know that there are now more than 8,800 breweries out there in the US. It's tough to stand out when there are that many competitors out there. How can OI help those breweries stand out?
So as Tim was saying, right, about how we are so focused on innovation, right? I think everybody knows this, but we have like 3 to 7 seconds to basically make an impression on the shelf. And as we do, most of the purchase decisions are made in the store. And so there's hundreds of decisions consumers are making unconsciously. And how do we stand out? And it's through innovation, right? We did partner with a company a while back about who has done extensive work around neuroscience and biology because of all these emotions based with the unconscious purchasing. And so we basically use that to leverage this data and drive the latest collection, which you're going to see at our booth. So please come see us, 3251. I want to see you there. And just to review what we have put together it's called the Catalyst Collection. And what it does, it's supposed to spark an emotional connection, and it's intended to generate brand loyalty to our customers. So hopefully you guys will like it and see it. Now, as part of the collection, we also have a brand new container. We're revealing Drinktainer. It's a wide mouth, holds carbonation. So we have been bringing this to our craft partners, firsthand before we actually are doing this in the booth. But I want to make sure you guys are aware of this, and this is one of the things we do. Now, the other two pieces that we really work on to be able to help them and stand out is one is glass advocacy campaign. We're working with an agency to focus on end consumer. And the other one, I think it's very important for everybody that doesn't know why, is value selling, which is basically a process because we have a very strong marketing team inside and a design team in-house as well. So we basically use global team and local experts to provide cross-category analysis or even cross-country analysis about beer. So if our craft brewers are always asking, hey, what's going on in Europe? What's going on in Latin America? What's going on in Mexico? How do we drive differentiation? So we do have that information and resources available for our customers and partners. And then on top of it, we have an in-house design studio with engineering and concept design, which I call it, we're like a mini marketing firm for those craft brewers that don't have the ability to actually source out an agency. So we go a little bit beyond than just selling catalog out of a glass. We want to be part of, our customers' ideas pipelines and what pain points we can bring. But I think it's also important to note that we have a dedicated commercial activation manager to really drive, new product development. And like Tim said, market communication. We want to be able to tell the story of glass to our customers. Now, this is offered to our customers as a resource available for those who buy O-I glass. And we also enjoy working with customers, making these resources available to design, to develop new solutions. However, we like also to create minimal disruption to their fill lines, because that's usually the case with craft today. How do I make sure I differentiate myself, but there's minimal disruption to my line, right? So those are the things we are working on, and I think that my customers can attest to these things that I just talked about. But I would be glad to talk to you more about in our booth at 3251. I think that's the number.
I appreciate the hard sell. So you heard her. Go visit their booth. But before we send you to their booth, Tim, we've got one last question for you. We've seen a lot of brewers institute carbon negative initiatives. Sustainability is huge with craft brewers. How can O-I help with those efforts?
Yeah. And just one further plug based on Lorena, we're going to have multiple sites of where to actually try the drink tainer out, right? So we're very excited about that project. It's a differentiated product. So I'm sure you can have multiple beers utilizing the drink tainer technology throughout your stay at the Craft Brewers Conference. Sustainability is so important right now, right? It's always been important, but in the time we are today, with everything happening in the world, it's got to be front and center of a lot of decisions consumers make and companies make. So I think there's a lot of ways we can partner together to help. Again, I go back to what I said earlier about the glass package itself, right? It is infinitely recyclable. So we are working on a lot of grassroots. The biggest challenge, right, in this whole thing is getting the glass back to the furnace, right? That has always been challenged. Some parts of the world, they do it great. A lot of government legislation gets involved with that, so maybe that's not so great. But in any event, we can get up to 70, 80, 90% recycled content utilization in our furnaces. And that's a great outcome. It's great for energy. It's great for the carbon footprint. It's great for all of those things. Now, the question is, how do we get it back to our furnaces overall? And we've been partnering with a lot of what I would say grassroots type of campaign things to generate momentum. For example, we have a new initiative out there called Glass for Good. And it was, again, a grassroots campaign to get local people around our operations, more or less, to bring the glass directly to our factory. And by bringing it directly to our factory, what we do is we will promote that by contributing to charities, local charities in the area, and it's based on some sort of, factor of weight and consumption and stuff like that. What that does is generate good momentum, right? It's good for the community, it's good for the employees, it's good for sustainability because it's encouraging recycling. Because in a lot of areas, and it's quite unfortunate, a lot of areas with commingled recycling and government intervention, they've taken out glass out of the recycling stream. Or if glass is in the recycling stream, it's actually still going to landfill and people don't even realize it. So this is a direct way of getting the glass back into the furnaces. Another way we can partner with every single customer, we do this a lot and we don't do it enough though, is closed loop. And basically, any craft brewer that has waste, has glass waste, they may throw it into the recycling bin or into a garbage bin. But you still don't know if that's truly getting recycled, where we would love to partner with every single craft brewer and just say, hey, let's work out the logistics of getting it directly back into our furnaces. Because what that can create is further work in terms of increasing our recycled content. And again, that has a sustainability component with that. So we're working very hard on those grassroots campaigns to try to increase the throughput of recycled content, which is very important. But more importantly is we're telling our story more, right? And I think that's very important as well. I don't think enough consumers understand that glass is 100% recycled. It can last forever. And we need to get that message out. And I think as Lorena discussed with glass advocacy and things like that, we're really starting to promote that as well. So there's a lot of different ways that we can help the sustainability journey with our craft brewers, and we would love to partner further on those kind of grassroots opportunities to make things better, because it's going to be a part of our lives forever.
So, Tim and Lorena, one last time, where can the folks visit you at the Craft Brewers Conference, and how can they get in touch with you if they're not?
Well, like I said, they can definitely come see us at 3251, or that's our booth number. Please come see us. And then, of course, you can contact our website, but there's also going to be the information down here for anybody who wants to get glass right away.
Tim, Lorena, we really appreciate the support from O-I for Brew Talks. We couldn't do it without you all. And, we appreciate everybody viewing this. So hope you enjoy the rest of the program.
Hey, everybody, we are going to get started with the second panel in just now. Okay. Okay, so welcome back to panel number 2. All right, we're streaming.
Hey.
All right, everybody. So we are back live.
How about a round of applause? Let's go.
Theo, thank God you're here. Okay, welcome back. We are at panel number 2 for everybody back at home, or maybe you've just tuned in. I'm Justin Fronte. I'm the Brewbound reporter. And we are going to talk about Generation Z. And we decided that this task was certainly far out of Justin's hands, because while I'm old, I'm not Justin old. So joining me is Zoe Licata, who is our new-ish editorial assistant.
Hello. Hi, everybody. How's it going?
Good. How you doing, bud?
Good. I'm excited.
Good. I'm excited that you're excited, because honestly, I'm scared.
No, don't be scared.
All right, cool.
Generation Z isn't that scary. It's
No,
just
definitely
a little
not.
scary.
Definitely not. A little bit, but. So yeah, we just want to take a second to thank all our sponsors, our presenting sponsors, Dogfish Head and O-I, and we also have the Ray's Beer Division, Inland Packaging, John I. Haas, Orchestra, G&D Chillers, Ska Fabricating, and I said Reyes. So great. So thank you to all our sponsors. Really couldn't do any of this without you guys. So we are going to be talking about Gen Z. The eldest members of Generation Z are now 24, verging on 25, meaning they've been of legal drinking age for a handful of years now. And if you haven't figured out how to connect with them through your brand, there's a not insignificant chance that it might be too late, but we're here to help. So it's easy to assume that since you've been reaching millennials successfully, that maybe you don't have to change up too much. And there might not be an epically long amount of time between the oldest members of the millennial generation and Gen Z's generation. But due to the rapid advancements in technology while these guys were growing up, they may as well have grown up on different planets. So there's certainly a lot of different things that you got to do when you're thinking about both of these groups.
Yeah, I mean, Generation Z, we kind of grew up with the internet in our pockets. And we also, as Sam mentioned on our first panel, we grew up with the beer category having this extensive array of hard seltzers and FMBs and other RTD options. And there hasn't really been the case for millennials or older generations. So there's definitely needs to be a new playbook for Gen Z. And so we're excited to talk about that today.
For sure. Our panelists today are building brands in this new era, and they bring a wealth of marketing knowledge from both inside and outside the beer industry. So please join me in welcoming Theo Hunter, founder of Crowns and Hops. How you doing, Theo?
Yo, what's good? How's everybody doing? Do I have to give a brief intro?
No, let's just get
I'm
into
fucking
it.
with y'all. Nice to see everybody.
We also have Dave Nosby, the senior brand manager for New Belgium Brewing's Voodoo Ranger and Fruit Smash hard seltzer brands, 2 things we just talked a lot about. What's up, Dave? How are you?
Hey, I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Oh,
I
thanks
can't
for-
really work the crowd as well, but I'm good.
Oh, you're going to be great. Thanks for being here. Last but absolutely not least, we have Marianne Karam, the marketing director of COOP Ale Works in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. How you doing, Marianne?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks for being here. This is your first big beer event, right?
It is my first big beer event.
Right.
Totally new to the industry, so be gentle.
Oh, you're going to be fine. So,
So let's just start off. I mean, when you're looking at younger LDAs, it's really important to listen in and see how these drinkers are engaging. So what are you guys doing to listen and engage with these Gen Z consumers? And I guess we can just start off with you, Tio.
My name is Theo Hunter. I'm the head of brewing operations and COO for Crowns and Hops Brewing Company in Inglewood, California. We are one of the only brewing companies, one of the only black-owned brewing companies in the nation, and we're extremely proud of that. First and foremost, I think it's really important to understand what it is that we're talking about here. I think the word marketing, advertising gets used a little bit too often, and we don't really understand that it's about reaching other human beings. That said, when we talk about this Generation Z, we're also talking about the generation that really made Crowns and Hops something that is sitting here talking to you right now. We're talking about the generation that was out in the streets last year fighting to make sure that their voices were heard, to make sure that Black Lives Matter was something that wasn't just a cliche statement, but was something that actually people understood and did some self-exploration and investigation in their own core values, and I turned it to that. It really is about core, because after all, Gen Z will see right the fuck through you. They will see through you like the Wizard of Oz. They will see if what you're doing is full of shit, or if what you're doing is worth investigation and has core values that they can align with. So I'm sorry I went on a tangent there, but yeah, the question again?
No, it kind of answers the question.
Thanks,
yeah.
Sam.
Yeah, what are you guys doing specifically you're all brands that are really connecting with these consumers and this consumer base. So what is it that you're doing to connect with this generation and engage with those consumers?
Yeah, so I'll distill that down to we have always been community-based. We've always been, in our opinion, an amplification of the community that we represent, and in its truest, most authentic form. It was absolutely missing in craft beer. I can't really say that's largely anybody's direct fault because of inherently where craft beer is cultivated, where it's celebrated, where it finds traction. But ultimately, there was and is an audience that doesn't even know what the fuck craft beer is. And that's what Crowns and Hops represents. So really it's about being as authentic as we can be, and not falling susceptible to going and aligning with status quo and assimilating, and thereby not even showing Gen Z that we're there.
Dave, how about you? How are you guys connecting?
Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about Voodoo Ranger, where to the point of community, I think that's a really ripe opportunity for connecting with younger drinkers and younger generations. I think Steve mentioned it on the last panel, but the community that we've really heard from the most on Voodoo is the artist community and the gaming community, the comic book community. That's a strategy I think you could see a lot of like, well, that's a lot of people. You can sell a lot of beer to those people. Let's market to them. How we've connected is actually that we launched Voodoo Ranger in 2017, and we waited and listened to what our drinkers told us, and we saw that community come to us and say, hey, can you send me the Voodoo Ranger graphic? I want to get that tattooed on me. Or do you mind if we do a comic book ourselves with Voodoo Ranger in it? And we kind of said like, there might be an opportunity here. And we're actually invited into this space, this community, to say like, yeah, Voodoo Ranger has a place here, rather than saying like, we're going to just try to market to these folks. I think to your point of authenticity, it's the same way, where if we kind of went in and we're like, we have a illustrated character, we're going to become a illustrated brand, and look at us, we're going to sponsor all of your events. That doesn't fly for this generation. It's waiting to be invited into their communities and then say, yeah, we can actually help elevate you now that we're here.
And I'd say similar to what both Tio and Dave have said, same. COOP is a data-driven organization, which I know is a very buzzy thing to say. I think every marketer in the entire world, regardless of your industry, says that, but it's definitely something that is true for our group. It's cross-functional data analytics, so not just our analytics team, which is led by a very smart person in our company called Derek, but it's a function of all of our jobs. So whether you work in marketing or you work in sales or supply chain, we're all a very data-driven group. And I'd say, because while listening online is incredibly important, actions speak louder than words, and numbers do a really great job of demonstrating what they're actually doing versus what they're saying. And then secondly, Tio in particular touched on it, the idea of being inclusive. My background has been the past 10 years spent in the luxury watch space for a brand called IWC Schaffhausen. It's been around for 150 years. So they have a lot of learnings, but they're also still learning. The watch space is still an incredibly exclusive space. It is a place that can be written off as snobby and not welcoming. I think for craft beer, maybe not to that extent, but for us, it's constantly exploring ways that we can bring new people into the fold with understanding that not everyone's going to care about the quality of hops and all of the craftsmanship that goes into it. Sometimes people just want something that's fun.
Marianne, I'm so glad you brought up data. And really quick before I hit our next question, the text line is open for questions again. You can text 617-336-8560, and we will get your questions up here and get you some answers from the panel. But you did mention data and how important being a data-driven organization is. So how do you gauge what's working in reaching the younger demographic? What do you guys look for?
Well, before we do anything, we have really set KPIs. Now, I say they're set, but they're also fluid because we don't know what we don't know. I've been not in this industry, but I've been working in marketing for close to 20 years, and I think anyone that works in marketing is well aware of the fact that within most organizations, if not all, we're the department that spends money. We don't make money. I disagree with that, but that is generally how it's seen on the budget sheet. So I would say we try to always back things up with numbers because that's a language that everyone in most organizations speaks. So again, it's not necessarily the sexy answer, but it's really focusing on the numbers.
Definitely. As a marketing person for a tap room, I once was spoken to about ordering $600 worth of donuts for Black Friday morning, but we hit twice that in retail sales before noon, so I think I was right. But anyway.
There's nothing wrong with $600 worth of donuts.
Absolutely not. Dave, what do you guys look to see how your efforts with Gen Z are working and effective?
Yeah, I think we have some tools. Like I think we have a nice level of like social listening and media mix sort of tools to tell us how to communicate with them. But ultimately, the brand itself for Voodoo Ranger is built on this aspect of creativity and giving artists a chance to express themselves through our brand. So we do that in a couple of different ways. Sometimes it's serious, sometimes it's fun, sometimes it's borderline inappropriate. But what we try to do is listen to what our target is telling us. They'll let you know. That's the one beautiful thing about Gen Z and younger millennials is if you overstep, you're going to find out really quickly. Like there's no mystery like there may have been in marketing of years past. So we just try to listen to them and say like, what's working? What are we getting a lot of comments on? What are people telling us that they like? And rather than taking that and saying like, okay, well, let's promote the hell out of that because that was a really good piece of content and that's going to be our strategy for the next 6 months. What we do is go, all right, cool. I'm glad they like that. Like let's try to make something that's kind of similar and learn from our successes as well as our failures, I guess.
I mean, that's one of the probably best and worst things about social media is that you're able to have a real-time conversation with your consumer base. So, Tio, how do you guys know when things are working really well with the younger drinkers? What do you look for?
I'd say I'd have to agree with Mary and David. I mean, at the end of the day, engagement is king. There's nothing like hearing directly from your community on what's working and what's not. I have a background in advertising and marketing and creative for the entertainment industry, for Universal Pictures, Paramount, Miramax, and I've seen it all. I've seen it all from internal marketing to some of the largest marketing agencies on the planet. And I'm telling you, we are living in a moment right now that is so unique and so special, and it's been demonized, ironically, for so long, ironically, until COVID. When people realized that their only direct communication with the consumer was through social media. And that's how Crowns and Hops was born. We were literally born through social media, taking that picture of that beer, where some of the brewers were like, how dare he take, the lighting's not even right, the liquid isn't, it's oxidized, all those things. And literally, we realized that there was an entire community that wasn't being spoken to, that wasn't being engaged with, that didn't have representation, that was there. It was all there. It was there for not just us as Crowns and Hops. It was there for the entire industry. It was whether or not people were actually listening was the key. And Gen Z is all about being heard and engaged with. Their thoughts and their opinions matter. It doesn't mean that you need to adopt them and change your entire mission statement and vision, but you do need to listen. And you do need to pick up on the clues because they will give them to you. They will give it all to you.
Yeah, and we saw this a little bit, the Brewers Association.
Tell us what you think, Gen Z.
And I'm the unofficial spokesperson. But we saw the Brewers Association did a survey last year of Gen Z consumers, and there seemed to be a trend that they don't care as much about who you are, but what you're doing, the actions of your organization, your company, and local seem to mean less to Gen Z. Is this something that you guys are seeing playing out? You can start, Tio, if you want.
Of course. we kind of started off, one, we aren't the first black-owned brewing company on the planet. There are other obviously phenomenal, Garrett, Celeste, amazing brewers around the country, but we were one of the loudest. When George Floyd was murdered, we were one of the first to make a statement out there, and to be honest, it was like one of those first moments to where it was like, do I say something or do I stay aligned with this voice in craft beer that says you shouldn't say something? And in that moment, it was like a light bulb went off to where it was like, this is an opportunity to be 100% exactly who the fuck you are. And we did it. And with the response that we got, not only from the community, some of it very polarizing, some of it, some of the typical shit, keep politics out of beer, keep all that, whatever the case might be. But what we were afforded in that moment was to literally hear directly from the consumer. So it's a strategy that we've been doing like consistently, is being the voice of the underrepresented. I think many people in this room probably are rocking Patagonia. I'm rocking Crenshaw. I'm rocking the Marathon, which is Nipsey Hussle. And if you don't know about him, look up who he is. I'm not expecting y'all to rock a Crenshaw or a Slosson shirt next day, but if you do want to have an idea of what your consumer is listening to and what they're identifying with, you got to break out of your shell, and that's what we've always been about. Not assimilating and not aligning with status quo, but rather just being our authentic selves.
And Dave, will pass this along to you. I mean, you guys are the only national brand up here. So what are you seeing from Gen Z about what they're caring about? I mean, are you seeing that they care less about localness?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd say that I'm seeing that, and I might just not be qualified to answer on that. I will say, we have two home states, North Carolina and Colorado, and both are absolutely monster states for us and continue to be a big part of what's driving our growth. So we obviously have our tap rooms there, and it's been a challenging, 18 months for those folks, but that's absolutely been a huge part of our marketing strategy through those rooms. So I think we still lean on it heavily, and I think that I'd be surprised to hear that was something that Gen Z didn't really care about. I guess the other part of your question of like who you are and what you do, and that they care more about what you do and not who you are. I think a really similar point of like, if what you do isn't who you are, then you're inauthentic, and you can see through that in a heartbeat. Like, to your point earlier of you grew up with all your information in your pocket, like these digital natives of people that are, let's call them 21 to 29, I'm gonna go with younger millennials in here too, just to make myself feel a little bit better. But like those folks, they have access to all of the information. So if you're trying to do something that is not who you are, you're going to be called out in an instant. Like I think the age of being a mega polluter and running like a little trash pickup campaign and running an ad about it and everyone feeling good, I think those days are over. And I think it's a good thing. We should thank Gen Z for that.
And Marianne, what are you seeing that these consumers are looking for?
Well, there's a stat out there that says 3/4 of Gen Z consumers are willing to boycott your brand if you don't align with their values. I think we've seen that really play out over the last year and a half in particular. Now, how long that boycott lasts is, TBD, but we've seen brands and personalities and people taken down for various reasons in very short amount of time. The other part of it, I think Simon Sinek said that it's less about your brand's product, more about your brand's purpose. I think that's exactly what you guys have been saying. Then lastly, what does local even mean to this group of people? To the point, they've had the internet their entire lives. Travel has been incredibly accessible if we're talking about people that live in the United States for the most part. And things like study abroad programs in college have become a huge revenue generating stream for universities. So these are people, I hate to say kids, it makes me sound like I'm old. I'm an older millennial. But what does it mean for them when they've grown up in essentially a global world and things that are happening, whether if it's in Afghanistan or it's in Denver, are really having an impact on their lives? I mean, I think that's driving a lot of it.
I will say that too, on a local standpoint, For me and my partner Benny Ashburn, what we're building in Inglewood, off of Crenshaw and Manchester, it has been up for grabs, and take that how you will, but in Black and brown communities, there have been no local concepts that really were enriching, that really served the community, that really served the people that already lived there. And that element of local is something that myself, Craig Bowers, in South Central is doing as well. And it's something that, one, I think really speaks to the true pillars of craft beer. I think all the things that we originally fell in love with, but we're introducing them to our community, from us, by us, so there still is a huge element of local to it. I don't think that people need to all of a sudden be everything to everybody. I think that's a recipe for disaster. But that said, I do think there's an opportunity to support other breweries that might need it, that are doing their version of local.
Yeah, I mean, and one of the issues of the past decade, I'd say, is we see lots of breweries opening up in those neighborhoods, and then they don't hire local residents, and then they wonder why their local community isn't supporting them. But you have people Ubering in from God knows where, and it's really been kind of a struggle. So I love what you guys are doing in LA. One of the things that all of you bring that's, I think, really important is you're coming to this industry with relatively fresh eyes. And Marianne, you're, 6 months into beer?
Just barely.
I mean, but that's so important. So when you look at this industry, because we're at a very, we've been at a very pivotal moment for a while now. I don't know how long a pivotal moment can last, because this one's kind of exhausting. But how can beer do a better job of speaking to younger consumers?
Well, the luxury industry isn't all that different from the craft beer and seltzer industry. People are buying goods for a lot of reasons, but there's a lot of similarities. What I would say is I think it's having a firm understanding of the baggage that this generation is bringing to the table. I feel like I'm talking a lot about downer subjects, but this is a group of people who their entire life have had school shootings in the background, global and economic crises, and now for the past year where they're starting their working careers, perhaps even families, it's been marred by COVID, and the long-term implications of that and how they interact with brands and just society, I think are really TBD, so it's hard to know. There's a study that came out of North Carolina State University that talks about the 3 things that can define Gen Z, and it's a constant need for innovation, which makes sense, again, when you think about the time they were growing up and entering adulthood. Convenience, we see that with things like the rise of Drizzly and GoPuff. And then lastly, escapism, and I think that goes back to my original point. I think all of us feel this way. I think we all need a little escapism at a certain point.
For sure. Dave, you're, a few years in, right?
Couple years, yeah, couple years.
What have you seen comparing to your earlier parts of your career that beer could do a little bit better, talking to the youth?
The youth.
The youths.
The youth.
I feel really old.
Yeah. So I didn't come from movie studios or luxury brands. I came from
his is better.
Dog food, which is pretty
You're
sexy
a horrible
industry.
start to your answer, Dave.
Let me tell you a thing or two about dog kibble. No, but I think the point remains is there's a lot of similarities and a lot of differences. And the one thing that I've really taken away from joining the industry is that we've segmented in an incredibly short-mannered way. We've looked at, you're not a beer drinker, you're not a craft drinker, you're not an IPA drinker, I'm a hazy drinker. And you have kind of got people down to these very specific occasions that define them as a consumer, while really they're a person and they enjoy drinking beer. And yeah, when they're when they're at a bar and there's a hazy, they might be like, yeah, I'll choose that over maybe a West Coast style because I like the hazy profile. But that's not a hazy consumer. I think that's the big thing I've taken away since I've come in, of pull it back a little bit and think of who are these people and what are their motivations outside of beer. And I think you can talk to them in a much different way that might resonate a bit better.
For sure.
Dave and I were talking about this, before
ahead.
the panel, and about how, at some point, millennials would have been the thing we were talking about on the stage, and at another point, it would have been Gen X, and maybe baby boomers. At some point, Gen Z is going to have very similar shopping habits to their 30-year-old plus counterparts when you think about the life changes that happen. So a lot of this too is looking at best-in-class examples from, I hate to say like time gone by, because there's always a need for innovation and things change, both technologically and culturally. But it makes me giggle a little bit that we talk about them in a way that they're just this unicorn that never existed. Yes, they are different, and they've had loads of different life experiences than perhaps someone like myself has had at my age, but it's not exactly rocket science.
All right, so all the people in Inglewood would be pissed if I didn't do this, because I try and do it. So I'm going to ask the entire crowd to wake the fuck up for 2 seconds and pronounce Inglewood the way that you actually say it, and that is Inglewood. So on the count of 3, I need a strong ass, thunderous Inglewood from the crowd. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Inglewood. That was sexy. I love that. I would also say that it's not rocket science. You know, I think one of the things that a lot of people get stuck in, and all the head trash starts to develop around, is how do I market this brand, rather than focus on the core of who they are. If you truly want change and you truly want something different, then you need to invite change and different to the table. Trying to develop these solutions and all these ideas and these cool concepts on shit that you know, and you're saying and you're swearing that you need something different, then you need to make sure that different is right in front of you, and that you're getting answers from different. Again, it's online, it's on social, and I equate it to working out, which I know that from the looks of it, all of you do quite often. You know, you could work on your arms and your legs all day. But if your core is whack, if your core is weak, then you could pick up a marble and twist your whole shit up. So if your core and your company and your staff and your employees aren't on the same path of what it means to unfold and to be something different in order to preserve the longevity of whatever core attributes and core principles that you have, then fuck marketing and branding and advertising. It doesn't matter, because if the experience of Gen Z is going to be something that doesn't reflect and says, hey, I want to build with you, Gen Z, or this is for you, this is your space, which is ultimately the freedom and the beauty of craft beer, is that once you give that pint away, it ain't yours anymore, it's theirs. And we should think about that the same way that we market and that we present our products and our brands to them as well.
And going off of that, I mean, beyond just younger legal drinking age consumers, the craft industry has really struggled with bringing in young Black drinkers. I'm going to ask all of you. I'll start with you, Tio. What can craft brewers do to bring in consumers and not appear to be pandering to them, like bring them in an authentic way that they're going to appreciate?
I think it ladders into what I just said. Be true to your own principles and stop looking at the Black community as a monolithic community. There are Black people that love to ride bikes, that love to hike, that love to surf, that love to do what they do. You don't need to pander. Just be true and just talk about the shit that you love. Because the reality is our community is just as diverse as your community. You know, just because I wear a Crenshaw shirt doesn't mean that I'm not going to rock out to some Paramore when I get into the Uber. You know what I'm saying? You don't know that, you know? So I think what we have is an opportunity to dive deeper into who we are and to present that, and to present that we're open to listening and opening to understanding even new facets of the shit that you love. You know, it's just like taking a hike up in the Rockies. You know, you may be stuck to one fucking trail, missing all the 30 other trails. You know, so really it's less about what you do and what you say, but more about being true to your core values. And the last thing I'll say is, if you have Black people in your community, make sure that they know that brew pub, that public house is theirs as well. Make sure that there's programming. Make sure that there's community leaders that know that that's a place, a public space for them to gather, to conspire, to do great things for the community that's also yours.
And Dave, we touched on this too, of like how Gen Z will call you out if they see that you are doing something that isn't real or that's fake. So what can you do to bring in that community still and to bring in these young drinkers without
Yeah,
being that
I think the
pandering
first
person.
thing is to acknowledge that someone that looks like me probably shouldn't be commenting on exactly what's right, and rather listen to the people who are experts in this space and can create those more inclusive environments. That's something that at New Belgium we take extremely seriously. We've made strategic hires internally, and we've brought in outside counsels to help and continue to evolve in that space. I think the big takeaway that I've heard from them is one that we've already touched on, which is, don't look at other communities as a way to sell more of your beer. Think of ways to help support those communities. And the answer to that question can't be by bringing your magical beer to them. They have their beer. They have their ability, and this is any community that I'm talking about right now. They have the ability to make their own. So if you're going to get into that space, you need to do it the right way. You need to first listen and then think of ways to elevate.
And one thing I will say too, I'm sorry to chime in real quick, is appropriation is a real thing. That is not the answer. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but Budweiser just put out a beer with Biggie Smalls on it. That is not the answer. Using cultural monikers and phrases and culture without any attribute or any invitation to the community from where it was derived is wrong. And there are several articles, I'm not going to go into and get on the soapbox about it now, but any community that has not had the ability to utilize and leverage their own culture, and for an industry that has struggled with diversity and inclusion for generations to all of a sudden, with resources, be able to leverage that culture for their benefit is not the answer. So,
I'm glad you said that, Tio.
I'd say part of it too is, like we had talked about inclusiveness earlier. It's, the luxury industry is sort of coming to terms with this as well. But it's about bringing in diverse voices into your organization and diverse decision makers, and making that part of your corporate culture. I mean, I think we also remember, I apologize because it feels like time is just blended into one never-ending stream. So was it this past summer, the summer before, when everyone had their black square on Instagram? What did that mean? And to the point of calling people out on their shit, we saw that. I remember a really classic example with Nike was, well, how about you share about how many people of color are on your board of directors, because Nike's going, and all of the athletes they use, and they posted that square with not a lot to say about it. So I think the point of people calling out industries and companies, I think that's a good thing. If that's going to be, at least for now, what it takes to hold people accountable, to move in this direction that I think for the most part everyone is agreeing that we all need to be moving towards, I think we're all on board with that.
For sure. One more plug for the text line. If you have questions for these guys, send them to 617-336-8560. All right, I want to move on to something that we, I guess we try to talk about, but it ends up with a lot of how do we do this? Brand loyalty. And Marianne, I know you probably know a lot about this from your career in luxury goods, but brand loyalty seemingly always been an issue within craft beer, given Rotation Nation. We see it crop up in hard seltzer. New brands are cannibalizing older ones. Marianne, you've worked on this from your time in luxury watches. What challenges do you see in building brand loyalty with this current generation?
Well, I'll address the point of cannibalization first, because I was working in luxury watches when the Apple Watch came on the scene. And every single headline and story was, it's the death of analog watches. No one's going to want an analog watch anymore. It's the death of the Swiss watch industry. Well, you know what? No, it wasn't. They're still around. The brand I worked for had been around for 150 years. Other luxury brands such as Cartier have been around a lot longer. There was space for both. And I won't go into the weeds about how that's worked out. And in luxury watches, people can certainly afford their Apple Watch and their analog watch, but there was space. I think that applies to most industries. So to the point of cannibalization, I think it goes back to more adapt or die more than anything. To the point of loyalty, it's a pretty easy question. Gen Z isn't loyal. I mean, not to oversimplify it, they're just not. But a lot of that seems to come with age. They're at a point, again, they're at the start of their careers, they may be more price conscious because they're not in a higher income bracket yet, because Again, they're 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. I mean, how much were any of us making unless we worked in finance at that age? I think part of it that the luxury industry has done really well is they understand it's a long game. Brands such as Cartier and Louis Vuitton have done an excellent job of product diversification because, while this may be hard to hear, there are some 21-year-olds that can afford a $12,000 watch and bespoke handbags from Louis Vuitton. Most can't. So how do you get them in the door? Again, it's that portfolio diversification. A lot of people can afford a Cartier keychain. They can afford a small leather good from Louis Vuitton. And so those brands have understood that it's a slow burn and it's a long game. So to get them in early in an attainable price point is the way to go. Now listen, they also don't have any restrictions around age. If a 13-year-old wanted to come in and buy a Cartier love bracelet, no one's gonna tell them no. So whereas this industry, there's obviously age limitations. But I think, when you have the opportunity for portfolio diversification, that's one way to look at it. But again, I came from a brand, it was an analog watch brand. Other than straps, there's not a whole lot else you can do. So I think to the question of loyalty, it's getting creative. It's, again, the idea of innovation. And to the point of diversification as well, it's your marketing channel strategy. It doesn't have to mean that you're adding a ton of new SKUs to whatever you're doing. It's just making sure that what you're doing is right and hitting the mark with realistic expectations of how long this may take.
So I'm glad you brought up, a portfolio strategy because, Dave, that's certainly something that New Belgium really has, especially right now. So what path are you seeing newer LDA drinkers take as they enter the portfolio? Are there certain products that bring them in? How do you keep them in? And how do you see them move back and forth between all your different offerings?
Yeah, I think the answer to that is probably different than it was maybe 5 years ago. So within New Belgium, you may have thought okay, you enter in through Fat Tire, you explore the Voodoo Ranger portfolio, you graduate to our sour program. I don't think that's really the case anymore. I think what we've done, especially with Voodoo Ranger, is tried to make as many accessible entry points into craft within Voodoo as we could. And whether that's our IPA or Juicy Haze or one of our rotational beers, once you're in, there's a lot to sample within the portfolio. But we don't actually see a really clear path like maybe we used to enter into Voodoo Ranger.
And Tio, you're building a new brand. So what are you guys doing and what have you learned that helps create a drinker base that is loyal to Crowns and Hops?
Well, again, we started with a community. We started with a community that didn't see themselves in the industry. So it was always about trust, not only with the consumers and drinkers, but also with this industry. There were a lot of people when I was walking around with a Black People Love Beer shirt in craft breweries just thought I was full of shit or thought it was gimmicky or didn't understand the crux of what it was that I was doing. But 7 years later, it goes to what my answer is: consistency. Consistency, in my opinion, is what is going to be the thing that is really going to make sure that consumers have any sense of affinity and loyalty to you. It doesn't matter if your logo changes from a bike to a Ranger with skeletons and all that good shit. What matters is
it's fair.
What matters is that New Belgium had programs for giving bikes to the kids, that were underserved in the community before it was even cliche to start talking about diversity. What we did with our 8 Trill Pills organization, to where we saw that it was very difficult for people in the alcohol industry to get grants initially in craft beer. So we created an initiative to help preserve and help the less than 1% of Black-owned breweries that were there. Wasn't no one going to do that shit. But it's about what are you doing that's aligned with your core values, your mission, and are you consistent with it? Because just to go to the social media element, that's how you drive your social media. That's how you get your numbers and your likes up. Post consistently. Engage consistently. It is about consistently, and in my opinion, that's what Gen Z is looking for to build any sense of loyalty to.
Can I add one thing, too, just about the point of loyalty? One thing COOP Ale Works has done, we have a new brand extension. It's Sonic Hard Seltzer. So part of that exercise, too, is borrowing some brand equity, which I think is also an interesting take on how this could potentially be achieved. For COOP Ale Works, we've dominated the Oklahoma craft beer space, but outside of Oklahoma, not a ton of brand awareness. With Sonic Hard Seltzer, it's a totally different ball game for us because we have Sonic on our can. Sonic means a lot to a lot of people. I mean, in the state of Texas, there's almost 1,000 Sonic drive-ins. The state of Tennessee has close to 600. Connecticut has 4, but there's still plenty of people in Connecticut that love Sonic. But again, I think that's another way when we talk about the roads to loyalty. If it's not about adding a new beer to your collection, the idea of partnerships is also something interesting to explore.
I'm glad you brought that up, Marianne. What have you noticed about what excites Gen Z when you do partner with a brand like Sonic, something that they've known their whole lives? How has that been working?
Well, we're still fairly new. The product only launched in May of this year. So I would say it's early days, and we've been available in the state of Oklahoma since May. We're launching in 5 other states in mid-October. So I think it's a little TBD on what we're going to take away from it. But again, to the point of borrowing brand equity, in the Sun Belt in particular, people are very passionate about Sonic. For a lot of people, it's the in and out that's not in California. They deeply care about it. A lot of people have a lot of brand attachment to it. They either, they work there in high school or they work there in college or even into adulthood. It's been a fixture of their community, especially because of the fact they're franchise owned. A lot of people have ties to them. So far, we've seen great feedback. People are really excited about it, more than anything to the point of listening. We listen a lot, and we hear a lot of, when are you coming to Kentucky? When are you coming to Alaska? When are you coming? So it's a good problem to have. I'll just be really excited when we're going to those states, so I can tell them, sit tight, it's coming.
The first Sonic in New Jersey opened on my first day at work at a newspaper, and we actually sent someone to cover it. So
it's a big deal. My best friend was a car hop there, and this was in the late 90s, and they still roller skated. We still talk about it. You can't pull out of my parents' neighborhood in Oklahoma City without hitting a Sonic in any direction. I mean, you're going to come across one. So it is a really beloved brand.
For sure. So Sonic Hard Seltzer and Fruit Smash have both taken really different approaches to the hard seltzer segment. And I know we talked a little bit about this on our prep call, but Dave, one thing that we've discussed is that Fruit Smash doesn't speak to consumers in the same way that the established segment brands do. It's a little bit sardonic, a little crass maybe, but mostly really fun. So that might be a risk, but how do you feel like that's playing out?
Oh yeah, it's absolutely a risk, a calculated one. But I think to the point, there was an earlier question, the first panel around what are retailers and distributors looking for now, and the answer is incrementality. As we looked at how we were going to enter into the seltzer space, we knew we had to do something that was distinctly different, and that had to be something that was at the core of that brand as we built it. So whether that was the liquid was going to be different, it was going to be made with real juice. We were going to use a normal can instead of a slim can. We were going to put color on our can. We're going to make it a bunch of designs. We gave that can to a tattoo artist and had them help design it. That's a lot different than what you kind of associate with the seltzer category as a whole, which is, tall, slim cans of seltzer, white packaging, very minimalist. But we knew if we put out an offering like that, we would just get shot right back down because that's not going to help a retailer, that's not going to help a distributor, and it's not really going to help us because it's not going to work. So as we built Fruit Smash, we just knew we had to talk a little bit differently and look a little bit differently in order for it to be a success. Results have been good so far. It's already a top 20 seltzer brand, that's exceeded our expectations, I'll say. And we're really excited about next year launching new innovations with it as well.
So as you guys are looking into this next year and with everything that's still happening with COVID and Delta variant, how big are experiential spaces and tap rooms and stuff for you guys to connect to these consumers? Do you want to start, Dave?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I can't imagine working in a tap room 20 months ago and just, we're going to go home for 2 weeks and we'll be right back. One thing that's been really cool about New Belgium is we did go home for 2 weeks, and then when it was clear that we were not coming back after 2, we found roles for everyone that was in our tap room within the company to help expand their career, which was awesome. So there were opportunities for them to go out, try new jobs. If they liked them, they could stay. If they didn't like them, they were welcome back to the tap room. The folks that did come back to the tap room came back with an energy that was, I don't know, a Gen Z energy? I don't know. Not an energy I don't have.
Also known as TO energy.
Yeah. I'll take that. But yeah, I mean, it's been amazing because they've really helped us launch Fruit Smash. So every weekend we've had Seltzer Saturdays at the brewery where you can get a bucket of Fruit Smash. Or they've got a slushie machine that they created Fruit Smash slushies out of. And it's been a really, really important touch point, especially for Fort Collins and Asheville, for people to come and experience the brand and taste the liquid in an environment where we can help deliver some of the personality that we talked to earlier. And our tap rooms have been just a huge, huge part of that and a big reason why the brand's been successful.
Marianne, how are you seeing that COOP is working in these places?
Sure. Well, I think on the COOP side of our business, we did have a tap room. It closed during COVID, and it remains closed. Our business was not built around a tap room experience. It was built around everything else. So it hasn't been a business implication for us whatsoever. You'll see at some point in the somewhat near future that we'll be transitioning into a larger space that's more of a hospitality play, and that's really what we're hedging our bets on in a very calculated decision. On the Sonic side of the business, again, it's still new. It launched well into the pandemic. It's also not being sold at Sonic drive-ins for obvious reasons. It's an alcoholic beverage. It doesn't really message that well, even though I think we all have the experience in high school of going and getting Sonic and adding additions to it if you needed to. But I think for Sonic in particular, we've really leaned into the message of celebrating moments at home and with family and friends, which is something the Sonic brand really leans into as well. It's about creating those moments with the people closest to you. So we focused on that, and you'll see that rolling out in a tailgating campaign. We're trying to be safe and responsible, is the short answer. We want to do what's right for our company, but also what's right for our community. So it's been asking ourselves the hard questions about just sort of experiential marketing in general, and for us, what's the right thing to do?
Tio, how about you guys?
Yeah, I think we have the benefit. We're still about 7-8 months from being able to open our doors, but we have the benefit of looking at best practices. I think what New Belgium does in terms of programs with their employees immediately and directly impacts the consumer experience. So that is extraordinarily valuable for you all to take notes from what that Gen Z, that millennial group is doing in order to make sure that it is digested by that Gen Z consumer is important. And to have a COVID-safe space, in the construction plans of our space, obviously indoor, outdoor space is critical, so that we can, fortunately, consider what the worst case scenarios might be presented to where we can still keep our doors open and keep people employed, because ultimately the brew pub is an extension of our homes. And that is something that we have not had in the Black and brown community. We have not had off of Crenshaw Boulevard is something that is safe, something that you can enjoy beverages, a meal with your family, and fantastic craft beer. So it is absolutely pivotal for us to have these spaces. It's key to our business model.
It's going to be huge for you guys. I'm really excited to see it finally open. Come visit. Marianne, I'm glad you brought up tailgate, because we actually do have a sports-related question. So within college sports, state laws and NCAA rule changes have opened the door for athletes to earn money from their name, image, and likeness. COOP is in a state where college sports are extremely popular. How do you view the NIL change as an opportunity?
It's definitely a hot topic within our organization. I think it's early days. We've been talking for the past however many minutes about how savvy Gen Z is, and they'll call us all out on our bullshit. Well, you've seen the rise of the micro-influencer, because peer influence is incredibly important amongst this group of people. It's important amongst a lot of groups of people, but with this one in particular. And what's the value of bringing on a college ambassador when you could very easily describe them as then being a corporate shill? How is that going to resonate? We don't know yet. It just started. So it's something that we're keeping a sharp eye on. And we've had partnerships with older college athletes that have gone on to, for instance, the NFL. We have a great relationship with Creed Humphreys, who plays for the Kansas City Chiefs. And during the draft, he had COOP at home. There were COOP ice buckets, etc. So we've been dabbling in the space, but just not officially in the way that the NIL changes have impacted us. So for us, it's a little TBD.
Makes a lot of sense. Dave, I know New Belgium already partners with Colorado State. Do you guys see any opportunities there?
Yeah, we have Old Aggie, which is our Colorado State University beer. We also have Old Tuffy in North Carolina. We'll NC State, a lot of NC State references today. But yeah, I think the answer is that it's early days still too. Like there's certainly a potential for an opportunity, but our agreements with NC State and with Colorado State, they're built on trying to elevate the university and elevate our breweries. So as we look at what NIL could mean, and honestly, it's so new that I don't think a lot of us really understand what it means. We just have to take a really hard look and make sure that like the core of our agreement with those universities is being upheld, and we are continuing to not only elevate the athlete, but elevate our brewery and those universities as well, and ensure that like the core there is, it's not really in sports, it's about fermentation science, and we want to make sure that's really kept intact.
For sure. Tio, is this something that's on your radar?
In a way, and I can speak of it, from the perspective of being a black man in an industry to where there are very few black men, especially in brewery ownership. There is obviously a huge conversation on how to get a more diverse and inclusive tap room, how to reach Gen Z. I think right now the model of hiring agencies to help you get these answers is few and far between. So what people are doing is they're going to influencers, they're going to talent, they're going to individuals, and they are not being paid for the same thing that they would give an agency for the exact same information. So it isn't maybe a apples to apples comparison, but when it comes down to getting information that will immediately impact your bottom line, that's something that should be paid for. These are people, whether it be influencers, whether it be individuals from organizations that specify or that are specific to reaching a market that you don't currently have, they should be compensated for it. They should be individuals that should be valued because the information has the ability to change things drastically for your organizations.
Definitely. Well, that's everything we have time for. I want to thank you guys. I'm sorry.
We can talk afterwards.
Yeah,
You
we
just
went over.
Continue to answer our questions.
Yeah.
We could just
I
get
mean,
a
I'll
beer at
just
the bar.
follow you.
I thought we were
Yeah.
just going to go to
Well,
the...
just the five of us
kicking
will
it.
just
Yeah.
stay on stage for the rest of the day.
Perfect.
Yeah.
We did have a TikTok question, and Zoe is our in-house TikTok expert.
Did you
so
say a
find her.
TikTok question?
No, I didn't get to give my TikTok
Oh,
question.
shit.
I'm sorry.
That's awesome.
All right, well, Marianne, Dave, Tio, can't thank you enough. Zoe, great job. Thank you guys for all showing up. We hope to see you in Santa Monica, California for Brewbound Live, November 30th, December 1st. Let's go drink some beers.
Thank you all.